Hi, friends. It's Miss Renee, your friendly neighborhood witch. I mean, librarian. I'm just a librarian. No witches. Welcome to Salem Gets Spooky. This is our kids' scary story program. We originally did this as a live Zoom event, um, and I've edited that to share it on our YouTube channel. So I did have some young friends share stories as well, and I have edited all of those out. Their stories were fantastic. Um, I just don't want to share them um, for privacy reasons. So let's see. I got my spooky pillows. My dog is just cute. She's not really spooky. So yeah, Daisy Ray's here. She's ready for some scary stories. And you may notice it's a little bit choppy cutting, and it's where I cut some stories and comments and discussion out. So enjoy, and happy Halloween. Thanks.
That's fine. I'm Miss Renee, the children's librarian at Salem Public Library in Salem, Ohio. Do my little intro. My office is not nearly as spooky as it looks. I just put a fun background on. It'd be kind of cool if my office had a witch flying around in it all the time. Okay, so let's get started with some spooky stories. Now, my first story for you guys today is called The Taily Poo, which sounds kind of silly. I mean, Taily Poo, what's that? This is a story from, actually, I think it's from Tennessee. It's an American folk tale. So, we ready for it? A long time ago, an old man lived by himself in the deep, big woods. His cabin had only one room, and that room was his parlor, his bedroom, his dining room, and his kitchen, too. That's a little house. And the old man had 3 dogs. One was called Uno, one was called Eno, and one was called Come to Go Calico. That's quite a name for a dog. One day, the man decided to go hunting to catch something for his supper. Here, 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 he shouted to his dogs, and they came bounding off the porch, eager for a chase. After many hours of hunting, the wind began to blow hard from the valley. It'll be dark soon, the old man said, and all we've caught is the skinny rabbit. But he headed home, afraid he might go to bed hungry that night. The old man cooked and ate the rabbit, and he gave the bones to the dogs. And then he leaned back in his chair, and he watched the moon as it rose up big and full, and the wind whistled around his cabin. And just as the old man was about to doze off, a most curious creature crept through a crack between the logs in his wall. Oh, you got a hole big enough for a creature to climb in? That's no good. And it had a big, long, furry tail. What is it? It doesn't actually say what the creature is. I don't know. As soon as the old man saw the varmint, he reached for his hatchet and with one lick, cut its tail off. And before the man could raise his hatchet a second time, the creature slipped out of the crack and ran away. And the old man, he was still pretty hungry because he just had that little rabbit. So he took that big long tail, and he cooked it, and he ate it. And after that, he stuffed up the crack in the wall. You don't want creatures coming in. And he went to bed. His stomach was full, and he felt so warm and snug that before he knew it, he was asleep. The old man hadn't been asleep very long when he woke up. Something was climbing the side of his cabin. It kind of sounded like a cat. It has a scratch sound. Who's that? The old man asked. He lay still and listened. And after a while, he heard a voice say, Taily Poo, Taily Poo, all I want is my Taily Poo. Who is outside of his house? I think it's the creature that he ate the tail of. The scratching went on and on. And the old man began to shiver and shake. And then he remembered his dogs. He went to the door and he called, here, here, here. And the dogs came piling out from under the porch, and with their noses to the ground, they chased that thing into the big, deep woods. I'm going to go to sleep now. And the old man pulled his covers tightly around him, and he went back to sleep. But in the middle of the night, he woke up again, and now he heard something try to get in right above the cabin door. "Who's that?" he yelled. "What do you want at this time of night when all good folks should be in bed?" He listened, and he could hear it going. Scratches. And then he heard the voice say, "Taily poo, Taily poo, I'm coming to get my Taily poo." The old man was so scared he couldn't stand up. So he called his dogs from his bed. "Uno, Eno, come to go Calico, here, here, here." And those dogs came bursting around the corner of the cabin. They caught up with that wild thing at the gate, and they tore the whole fence down trying to get at it. And then they chased it into the swamp. At last, all was quiet again, and with a weary sigh, the man went back to sleep. The dogs chased it off. It'll be fine. Toward morning, something down in the swamp woke up the old man. First, he thought it was the wind blowing louder than usual. But when he listened again, he heard that voice crying, "You know and I know, all I want is my Taily poo." And the old man called his dogs, "Here, here, here, Uno, Eno, come to go Calico." This time the dogs didn't come. The old man ran outside into the moonlight and he called again, "Here, dogs, here, here, here." But there was no trace of them. There was just the sound of the wind blowing around the torn down fence. That thing, whatever it is, it had led the dogs way off into the swamp and lost them. Sadly, the man went back inside the cabin and shut and barred the door, and he went back to bed. Just before daylight, the old man opened his eyes, the way people do when they feel there's someone else in the room. Uh-oh. Something was stirring among the pots and pans, and something that sounded just like a cat began climbing up the covers at the foot of the bed. The man listened and heard it. He looked over the foot of his bed and he saw 2 pointed ears. And then he saw 2 big, round, fiery eyes staring at him. And the man wanted to call for help, but he was too scared. That thing kept creeping up until it was right next to the old man. And then it said in a low voice, "You know and I know that I'm here to get my Taily poo." And the man sat up and pulled the covers over his head. And all at once he got his voice and said, "I haven't got your Taily poo." "Yes, you have," said the thing. "Yes, you have." And it jumped on top of that man and it scratched everything to pieces. And now there's nothing left of the old man's cabin in the deep, big woods except the chimney. But folks who live in the valley say when the moon shines and the wind blows, you can hear a voice say, "Taily poo, Taily poo, now I've got my Taily poo." And that's the end. All right, you guys want to see a picture of the creature?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, the green screen thing is messing it up. There he is. He can. I mean, it's got really big. I don't know what it is. Look at those claws. Like, this is a really super short one.
Mm-hmm.
And it is just called Nanny. And it's by Angela Johnson, actually, who I have met. She's an excellent author. My nanny, Sarah, tucks me in as the shadows wait for her to leave so they can creep out of the closet towards me. She smiles as she steps over the books and puzzle pieces I've left on the floor and then closes my door. But tonight, I decide to escape the shadows. I open the door and dash towards Sarah's room, only to find her at the end of the hall, whispering to them, the shadows, and telling them with a smile that I was waiting for their nightly visit to my room. And that's the end. So her nanny is sending the shadow creatures. Yikes.
So she was the one telling her.
The nanny like acts all nice, but she's sending shadow creatures in, I guess.
To spy on her.
Maybe.
Or just to creep her out.
Oh, you guys flipped upside down. All right. Here's another very short one. A Day at the Lake. It's not haunted. I had scoffed at Bradley on the way up in the car. Cursed then, he grinned. You're an idiot. Hidden Lake was cold, still, dark as a pool of spilled ink under the summer sun. My hands, already slippery with wake spray, began to sweat on the handle grips of the tow rope stretched taut between me and the ski boat. Oh, he's water skiing. I glanced down again and felt my stomach lurch. Wasn't my imagination. Beneath me, flashes of corpse pale bodies knifed through the murky water. Ew. Frantically, I signaled Bradley to turn the boat back toward the shore. We were so far out. Brad, why did you take me so far out? Sightless eyes glared up at me. Patient. Waiting. Bradley turned the boat in a slow, lazy circle and headed in, unaware. The shore beckoned, only 100 yards more to the beach. Okay, we're gonna make it. The tow line jerked in my hands and went slack as the ski boat's motor sputtered, spat blue smoke, and died. And I began to sink. And that's the end.
Mm.
Oh, but what's in that lake? But I don't think we want to be in there with it. All right, I'm gonna do one more short. I have one more real short one. And this one is by Stacy Godinier, and it's called Death Rides a Pink Bicycle. Huh, I didn't know Death knew how to ride a bike. Calvin walked home from school thinking about how much he hated his kid sister, Annie. She was skipping beside him, humming some ridiculous kindergarten song and embarrassing him as usual. He was about to tell her to shut up when a little blonde girl, riding a bright pink bicycle, raced by, knocking him off the sidewalk. Watch it, he hollered after the girl as she stopped at the street corner ahead. Slowly, the girl craned her neck toward Calvin until he could see her face, or rather, what should have been her face. Instead, bits of pink, doughy flesh hung from a bleached skull. Black eye sockets, empty as a bottomless pit, stared back at Calvin. The skeleton pointed a bony finger at the boy, then turned and pedaled the pink bicycle into the street. Bam! The garbage truck that smashed into her didn't even hit the brakes. Oh no. Calvin ran to the corner, dragging Annie behind him. But there was nothing there. No girl, no bicycle, nothing. Did he see a ghost? By the time they got home, Calvin had just about convinced him that he had imagined the whole thing. That is, until he saw his dad unloading a bright pink bicycle from the car. It was the one little blonde-haired Annie had been asking for. Suddenly, Calvin knew what he'd seen. It was Death riding the pink bicycle. His sister's death. He realized he didn't hate Annie after all. Just the opposite. So Calvin jumped on the bicycle and bolted into the street, desperate to save his sister. He didn't even look where he was going, which is why he didn't see the garbage truck heading his way. Called The Murky Secret. It appeared one day in 1867. Ooh, that is a long time ago. A green glass bottle sitting on the druggist's counter. So like the drugs, like Rite Aid. It was a huge bottle. But what amazed customers was the creature floating around inside. Its face was grotesque, with wrinkled cheeks and staring eyes and lips twisted into a hideous grin. But its body was worse. It was shriveled, with hairy arms, and a fish-like tail hung where its legs should be. It's a pickled mermaid, said the druggist, his eyes glowing. I bought it from a sailor. The druggist's assistant shuddered. The boy had seen more than enough of his employer's ghastly specimens lined up in the back room, all floating in bottles of brine. A shrunken sea serpent with two heads. Something dredged up from the depths of the ocean that was all spines and teeth. A gelatinous blob studded with bulging eyes. And just this morning, a new bottle had appeared on the highest shelf, a bottle identical to the one that enclosed the pickled mermaid. But the liquid was too murky to see what was inside. Whatever it was, it fascinated the druggist. He often slipped into the back room to visit his newest specimen, and when he emerged, his sharp face was lit up by an evil grin. He looked like a thief who had just stolen a fortune in gold. The druggist enjoyed having a pickled mermaid on his front counter. He watched his customers' faces and snorted with laughter when he saw their looks of horror and disgust. One old woman tugged at the druggist's arm, pulling his head low so she could whisper in his ear. "You'll be sorry," she said. "Merfolk do not take kindly to anyone who harms them." But the druggist just shrugged. He combed his fingers through his pointed goatee, separating the gray hairs in the center from the black ones on each side. "I fear nothing," he said, and then he smirked like someone relishing a secret. But at that very moment, something happened that surprised even the druggist. Suddenly, the sun was eclipsed by a jet black sky. Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and rain poured forth, as if all the water on earth had risen to the heavens in order to fall upon this coastal city. Never before had the residents of Charleston experienced such a furious storm. At night, they pulled their pillows over their heads, shutting out the flashes of blinding light. But they could not escape the ear-splitting thunder. It rattled their beds and sent tremors of fear all the way down to their toes. They desperately hoped the weather would change, but it did not. Night after night and day after day, the violent storm assaulted the city. Evil-smelling water oozed into cellars. Yowling cats climbed onto rooftops and into treetops. And inch by inch, the water rose in the streets until it lapped at the steps of the druggist's store. And as the days dragged on, residents began to mutter, surely there was a reason for such a storm. The old woman who had warned the druggist began to roam the streets, crying out hysterically, "The merfolk are angry!" She shrieked, "We'll all drown unless the mermaid is returned to the sea." Down by the docks, the superstitious sailors agreed. They believed that merfolk controlled the weather, accompanying ships like they liked through gentle seas and sending those they disliked into the teeth of violent storms. "This flood is the druggist's fault," they said. "He's the one who has a pickled mermaid." The word spread from alley to alley, lane to lane. Soon residents were pouring out of their houses and marching towards the druggist's store. Wind raged, tearing at their clothes and whipping the never-ending rain into their eyes. They slogged along the streets, knee-deep in mud, and at each crossing they were joined by others, fists raised and faces contorted by anger and fear. By the time the mob arrived at the store, the druggist had sent his assistant to bolt the front door. The marchers were furious. They pounded on the door with their fists. "Give us your mermaid," they shouted. "Give us your mermaid if you value your life." The druggist raced upstairs and leaned out a second-story window. "I have no mermaid," he said. "It was only a trick." "We saw her," someone shouted. Everybody began chanting. "We saw her," because he had the bottle on his counter. "You're wrong," yelled the druggist, and he sent his assistant to get the bottle from the front counter. The boy wrestled it up the stairs, the druggist held it up in front of the window. But before he could uncork it, a rock was flung by someone at the back of the crowd. It hit the bottle and shattered it. Now the druggist was angry. He kicked aside the broken glass with his brine-soaked shoes, and he picked up the slimy creature. "You fools," he said, "watch!" And he snipped at the hidden stitches around its waist. And when the two halves fell free, he waved them in front of the crowd. "The bottom is the tail of a fish, and the top is part of a monkey. I tricked you all." This enraged the mob. Not only had they been fooled, but the rain was still pouring down, and now they had no mermaid to throw back into the sea. They picked up dead rats floating past their knees and hurled them at the druggist. No one else in Charleston would capture a mermaid, a man shouted. You must have one somewhere. And he threw a handful of mud right into the druggist's face. The druggist backed away from the window, wiping the muck off his face, his eyes flashing. More mud and stones thudded against the store. Windows broke, and a wooden panel in the front door splintered. The druggist grabbed his assistant's arm. Hurry, save the bottle on the top shelf in the back room. Hide it for me. I'll delay the crowd. Does he actually have a mermaid? And I don't know. The frightened boy raced down the stairs. He could hear the mob breaking through the front door, tossing medications about, trampling on dried herbs. He rushed into the back room. Twice the key slipped from his sweaty hands, but he finally managed to lock himself in. And then he pushed a ladder over to the shelves and grabbed the bottle of murky liquid. When he tipped the bottle, he was startled to see a flash of shimmering scales inside. A lock of golden hair! Stranger yet, he thought he heard a muffled song rising and falling within, like waves lapping upon a moonlit beach. He actually has a mermaid in a bottle. By now, the mob was pounding on the door to the back room. He heard the druggist bellowing above the roar of the crowd. Just a dusty old storeroom, he shouted, but angry men were ramming the locked doors with their shoulders. The boy flung open a window to the alley, struggled to lower the bottle to the ground, and dove out head first. It was so muddy he could barely hang on to the bottle, but he hugged it to his chest and floundered along as fast as he could. And the mermaid pressed her face against the glass and smiled. The boy was about to turn the corner and slip out of sight when he heard the mob crash into the back room. He looked and he saw someone leaning out the window. There he goes, the man shouted, and he jumped out the window, followed by a dozen others. They rushed after him, splashing and yelling, sure that the bottle held the very mermaid they wanted to return to the sea. The boy's legs were aching and he was breathing hard, but he forced himself to run faster. Then one man began to pelt him with iron nails from his pocket, trying to break the bottle. He was a carpenter who thought that hitting a mermaid with iron would undo her spells. I don't know that story. By now, the boy's heart was pounding in his ears, but he could still hear the mermaid's song. It made him forget everything the druggist had said. He would not hide that bottle, even if he could escape from the mob. Nor would he let the carpenter or anyone else hurt her. He must return the mermaid to the ocean itself. So he splashed down to the dock, tugged desperately at the bottle's cork, and pulled it free. And at that very moment, the druggist raced past the mob like a man possessed. He leaped onto the dock. Stop! He screamed. But the boy was too quick. He flung the uncorked bottle, into mermaid and all, into the sea. Suddenly, a giant wave crashed ashore. It split as if sliced by a knife and missed the boy. But it engulfed the druggist in a wall of water and sucked him to the bottom of the sea. And then the sun began to shine. Oh my gosh, this powerful mermaid. Months later, when the boy was walking along the beach, he came upon the very bottle that had imprisoned the mermaid. He leaped back, horrified to see something dead and shriveled within the bottle. Green screen's getting me. Not the mermaid. Oh, we thought he saved her, right? He forced himself to take a closer look. And when he rolled the bottle over, he shuddered, for inside was a shrunken corpse with a scraggly goatee, gray in the center and black on the sides. And that's the end. So the bad druggist who captured him and had the mermaid ended up, I thought that one was fun. All right, I have one more for you guys. It is called Two Heads. One day, a taxi driver received a call from a man who was staying in a hotel in the center of the city. He wanted to be picked up and transported to the airport. When the taxi driver arrived at the hotel, he had to wait more than an hour for the man to come out. When the passenger emerged from the hotel, he was carrying 2 large bags. Always friendly and willing to assist, the taxi driver got out and tried to help the man with his bags. To his surprise, the man refused and insisted on loading the bags into the trunk of the taxi by himself. Just then, the taxi driver noticed a horrible smell. Oh, it was the stench of rot and decay, and it was coming from those bags. When he got back in the taxi, he noticed something else that was strange. The passenger seemed really nervous, and he kept looking over his shoulder. The taxi driver followed the route to the airport, and on the way, the suspicious passenger asked him to stop at the corner because he wanted to make a phone call. The driver obeyed and waited patiently when the passenger got out to make his call and just wanted to meet him private. And as he sat in the taxi, the driver, he could just still smell that terrible stench coming from the trunk. The odor of decomposition was unmistakable. The nervous passenger returned and got into the back of the cab. The driver looked in the rearview mirror and noticed that the passenger was eyeing him suspiciously. By the time they reached the airport, the passenger was extremely nervous and sweating profusely. He asked the taxi driver to wait for him in the parking lot because he was worried he might have missed his plane. Then the passenger got out of the taxi and hurried off. The taxi driver was sitting there for a few minutes when he suddenly realized that the passenger had forgotten to take his bags with him. They were still in the boot of the car, the trunk of the car. The smell was becoming so terrible that people who were passing by the taxi had to hold their noses. The driver realized that the mysterious passenger was not going to return and decided to find out what was in those bags. He got out of the car, and when he opened the trunk, he was almost overpowered by the terrible smell. With trembling hands, he opened bags, and inside, he found 2 rotting heads, one of lettuce and one of cauliflower. So they were just rotting vegetables. Saw them before?
Yeah.
That's a fun one. Stories I had for you guys. So I hope you enjoyed and have a happy Halloween. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
I'm back. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. The stories that I shared tonight came from Ask the Bones, which is a book of scary folk tales from around the world, as well as The Tailypoo. That's actually its title, is The Tailypoo. And it is an Appalachian folk tale. I believe the version that I used is Gail Galdone. And a couple of the short stories came from Half Minute Horrors. And the last one was from scaryforkids.com. If you like scary stories, all of those are wonderful resources and things to check out, especially the scaryforkids.com website. I found some really great stuff on there. It was just, there was too much for me to share in one program. So if you want more scary stories, check out that website or come in and see us at the library and borrow one of the books that I mentioned. And I hope you have a happy Halloween. Thanks. Bye.